Batman, we always said, was Bruce Wayne until he had his tools. He suddenly became Batman. He was able to do so much more with what he had. Right. So I'm a strong believer in that. It will change the type of work, right, that we're hiring. You don't need labelers doing little, things to train the model anymore. You can have synthetic data and AI build those things. But the role of thinking through the trust and safety issue or that, privacy thing, the strategy around that, so the roles will change so people can have a different level of thinking.
Welcome, Andy, to AI and CX podcast. We are very lucky to have Andy today, who is the SVP at Edgevana, where he leads new business initiatives, strategic partnerships, and growth. And he has had a long career in CX and technology transformation. So really excited to kick off AI and CX podcast with you, Andy, today. Would love to have you introduce yourself and talk about a little bit of your journey for our listeners today to start off.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. This is definitely a pleasure. So I've been in technology for 25 years. I'm originally from Southern California. I went to University of Southern California for undergrad, and I went to management consulting at Accenture for 11 years. I initially started my career deep in tech. I was an architect, solution architect in enterprise systems, CRM implementations, master data management. About 15 years ago, I actually transitioned into the private industry, into marketplace businesses. So the joke was always, I want to work for companies that will never get acquired by Salesforce or Oracle. And it has nothing to do with those companies. They're just very unique global brands and marketplaces with multi-sides. So I was at eBay for 5 years as a director of product management. LinkedIn, a couple of years before the Microsoft acquisition. So I was there for 5 years, and I was a senior director there. And the last 5.5 years, I was at AirBnB, where I was actually leading product and platform for Airbnb's global operations and community support teams. Career was amazing. I actually took a career break for 8 months and traveled with my family. We did 17 states, 7,600 miles. Saw places like Mount Rushmore and Yellowstone National Park, and did a lot of stuff with the family. But I just started at a new startup just a few weeks ago, so it's been an amazing journey.
It's phenomenal. I think our that's such an incredible ride, and you've seen the growth of internet companies with eBay, then social networking, then shared economy, and now AI and Web3. So what an incredible journey, and look forward to learning from your experiences today. So let me start off right there. As we were discussing, you've seen the last 15 years of technology change in CX from your journey at Accenture, right from Accenture to eBay and LinkedIn and then Airbnb. Talk our listeners through those sort of phases of change over the last few years. What has been different in this most recent GenAI wave versus the last couple of transformations you've seen?
Yeah, it's a great question. Coming from a big company like Accenture, which was helping enterprises transition to new technology or new implementations, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was a lot about big scale ERPs or big CRM systems, and change initiatives would be, a big initiative that could take multi-years, and there would be a big bang change. And then maybe there were some changes over time, but they would be 2 to 3 year type transformations. Over the last 15 years in marketplace businesses, and these businesses are very dynamic, you can't be doing a big bang and just expect everything to change, right? The technology, by the time you finish the program, the technology could be out of date. So getting and the biggest wave of generative AI and AI in the last few years, AI has been there for 5 to 7 years, but this last wave of the last few years, it's really increased the pace of change, where it's not just an enterprise technology. People are using these applications in everyday life, and being able to apply that to help them do their job more effectively, be more productive, be the experts that they can be, has really kind of changed the game. Mm-hmm. And so including the pace of change of how they adopt tools or want to use it has changed, right? So it's not a big bang, it's smaller iterations, getting value, increasing their own use of the productivity of the tools to do their jobs more effectively. And that's been a big transformation just in the last few years even.
Right. So one of the questions which we hear a lot from in the recent generative AI wave, and we talk about this a bunch, there is a part around generative AI tools which are seeing rapid adoption. Companies like Cursor, for example, this coding copilot tool, and so on. And then there is generative AI within the enterprise. And you have been part of some massive enterprises. I know Airbnb had a very large services team, and then LinkedIn and so on. Talk to us a little bit about that. When you see a new technology being pitched to you, right, from a perspective of enterprise AI, what timeline do you give yourself or your organization to see full-scale adoption of that within the enterprise AI? Is it weeks, months, years, right? For example, tens of thousands of people to start using it. This question links to how quickly will GenAI move within the enterprise, right? Is it more like on-prem to cloud kind of a transition? It happened over a decade, or is this more, very rapid kind of a transition? Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it really change as we speak, right? So it's not going to be the decades, but major transformations may be a multi-year program, but the value you can't wait for the multi-year program to be finished. It's finding the use cases that you can actually apply and adopt the change to get the value that improves multi-stakeholders, right? If it's just about financial costs, you're going to lose the experience or the engagement of the employees. If it's about operational efficiency, right, that might be great from a operations and the bottom line, but you might miss the experience that you're trying to give to the end customer. So I'm actually seeing a lot of adoption be in smaller phases, realized faster, even though there might be a multi-year transformation happening. People aren't thinking about the multi-year. They're thinking in days and weeks and months instead of weeks, months, and years. So that's a big change.
That makes sense. So switching gears, and you can talk about, pick from any of your experiences, because you had incredible roles in each one of these places. Often there would be, in your teams would have a product and technology owner. You were the product and technology owner for CX transformation, and there would be an operations owner who is leading the CX teams from the operational perspective. Talk to us about that partnership. How would each of those, your role, influence their roadmap and vice versa, and any advice for our listeners on how to make that successful?
So I think that's one of the biggest success criterias or factors to true success. It's not a bunch of product and technology people seeing the latest technology and just trying to ship it over the fence and hope it adopts.
Yeah.
It's actually about what problems are we actually solving for? How can technology be an enabler to really accelerate the experience you're trying to drive, the benefits from the business, whatever initiative is trying to achieve. But it's a partnership from the beginning, not a tech thing and then a business thing. It's actually, what is our existing plan for the experience we're trying to drive? How can we work together to create the right outcomes? What outcome are we trying to achieve, and then breaking it down into smaller pieces. So it's not a roadmap for product and technology and a roadmap for implementing the change.
Right.
It's an integrated roadmap around the experience that we're driving with technology enabling that along the way.
So almost sort of from a planning perspective, your teams would meet on a periodic basis, once a year, quarterly almost, to be able to see what.
Even more frequent. So quarterly, there would be roadmap updates, but monthly, there would be iteration changes. Some of these changes needed longer to adopt, or there might be a seasonality piece to the actual adoption to the operations team. So when were those big moments of change? Can we align it to a company event, a launch or some sort of initiative? So there's already a natural kind of momentum, and it wasn't a big bang, but there was smaller, releases, smaller initiatives with feedback, right? You need to have the feedback loop around, was our assertion correct? Is the experience actually changing? How are the metrics maturing? How much data and time is needed before you start seeing the changes? Because a lot of it doesn't happen overnight.
Makes sense. And especially your previous job, Airbnb is famous for this 7-star customer experience, or I think 12-star. 11-star customer experience that Brian talks about. So I'm sure you must be hearing about that from leadership, and to go above and beyond the customer service side. What did that look like from a day-to-day planning or road mapping perspective? What was the mandate for customer service to go 11-star, and how did that manifest for you guys?
Even in the last wave, in the last few years of generative AI, we could have been the first, and we've seen this in the news, the Klarnas and others starting to pull back. We could have been the first to launch some of the capabilities, right? We were a close partner with OpenAI and Microsoft and others, and we actually said, it's not quite ready, right? So let's not launch it to our external customers till we learn internally. So can some of the operations teams look and feel like geniuses by getting knowledge, given to them, so we can actually learn how the models will work. Models keep changing every single day. Which is the right model? The user shouldn't care. They have a task, a job to be done. The models should work for them. So we built platforms behind the scenes to help kind of route to the right teams in the right time in the right moment, right? So instead of just launching out to get, hey, a buzzworthy headline, what was the actual experience?
Interesting.
So the metrics we looked at were balancing experience, financial impact, operational efficiency, and the culture piece, right? How is the adoption going?
Makes sense. Which leads me to the next question of, in large, amazing companies like you have worked at, there's always this question of build versus buy versus partner. You had incredible technology teams and also set of vendors you could pick from, or do a combination of that. Talk to me a little bit about that. And that's always a debated topic, and we see leaders trying to walk the fine line between those.
It's a great question and something I've seen through my whole career, right? It's always something that companies struggle with. When I was in consulting side, we were helping companies implement some of the buy technologies. But when I moved into Silicon Valley companies, right, eBay, LinkedIn, Airbnb, I call it the classic Silicon Valley problem. Smart engineers, smart teams, have never worked in customer experience or operations teams. So they go, here's a hard problem, let me go build it.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to step back and go, just because we can, doesn't mean we should. Should we be building this CRM or this routing platform? Is that truly unique to our business? And so coming up with principles around, is it core to our business, or is it contextual or supplemental? If it's core, our data, the experience we want to drive, the 11-star experience, yes, those are things that we want to invest engineering and technology capabilities. But if it's supplemental and it's beneficial, but we can actually get the benefits faster, can we partner? Can we build, buy, or integrate? And that principle is hard to adopt early on when companies have very smart teams that are young and want to make impact. They don't ever want to maintain or upgrade. They don't want to go add the new feature for the next release. They want to move on to the next shiny thing.
Yeah.
So having that being translated is like, there are things you can go buy and integrate with, partner with, that will accelerate the benefits. And maybe over time, if you think that becomes a differentiator, you can build that in time, but you're not having to wait for the business benefits or the experience benefits.
Makes sense. And for teams building it in-house, if it's not core to them, maintaining it and keeping up to date with what's changing in such a rapidly changing environment, it's just, you can build the first version, or teams can build the first version, but keeping up with a company which is dedicated to do that over a long period of time, it's just
it's a huge cost. It doesn't help them actually learn new things, so they're going to want to move on to a different project. And so it's not adding the value that they think it is initially. Hard problem initially, but it's already been solved most likely. So how can you partner?
The other aspect that is cost. I know you've talked about the scale of some of the organizations you are part of, hundreds of millions of the customer touch points potentially. GenAI can be expensive. So did the cost decision impact your build versus buy at all?
It did, and especially in the last couple of years with GenAI, when it first came out, everybody was like, we need to have this, and I don't care what cost it's going to be, let's just go. And then you start doing the math and going, wait, this could be a $30 million compute cost that no one ever factored for, right? So this balance of let's test and learn and get the use cases, because there wasn't even an understanding of what benefits it could actually drive. I've seen the maturity of like, just because it says AI doesn't mean it solves everything. You got to find the right use cases. AI has a huge spectrum, right? Computer vision to actual generative AI models to actually agentic actions, right?
Yeah.
And so there's not a one size fits all. So if you can go drive towards, the outcome of like, what am I trying to do? Some of the things actually we may want to bring in-house. And so that could reduce the cost and dependencies on the big AI providers. And that's going to be a tricky balance as you're kind of going on this journey of, especially as technology is improving and new solutions are coming out there, some of the costs even a year and a half ago are no longer relevant. You can actually have a provider that can provide that, and you can accelerate those benefits for significantly lower costs.
This is what Edgevana does.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And then when partnering, so that's on the build side, when partnering with the rapid pace of change these days, right? The new startups coming up every week, right? In CX and Y Combinator, apparently there were like 90 companies or something looking at voice agentic AI and so on. But as an experience, as a leader who wants to not miss out on the new, but also has to support a global organization, how do you think about going after the new versus partnering with the tried and tested who've been around for 20 years?
It's a great and it's a hard challenge, right? Because it's like you can almost not stay on top of everything that's coming out. The latest venture fund that invested X million into a startup versus the Salesforces or Oracles or others that are trying to compete and re-adopt. So it's really understanding, out of the sea of different vendors and solutions and different offerings, what are your ultimate needs? Are there a few that you can have engaging conversations to educate yourself and the team? And then pick one or two that you can partner with. Be a partner, not a vendor, right? I think that's the key difference. So you guys are both solving the problem together.
Interesting.
And the company can invest in helping you accelerate your benefits. They'll also learn. So there's a reciprocal relationship, instead of like, I'm just going to have this piece over here with that solution and this. And then suddenly you have this, incongruent solution that is hard to maintain, and technology is changing, and it just becomes a mess actually. So one or two very strategic discussions and partnerships is what I strongly believe would be key.
That makes sense. And do you have just double clicking on that topic, do you have a certain level of organizational maturity, at least which you're looking for when looking to partner? And then how much influence, and not just influence, because again, sitting in Silicon Valley, to your point, were you getting pinged by leadership from all sides? Hey, look at this partner versus that all day, and navigating that. Yeah.
Every week, a new email from the CFO or CTO or somebody from the board going, I know somebody that started this company that does this thing. You guys should do it. And so it's being able to filter out the signal through the noise and going, here's our core principles. There's a few core partners that we know do this space. I want to have my team be aware of the trends. I personally have always kept on top of these trends. There's many different sources to be able to get these podcasts, even x.com, even there's a lot of noise on there these days, LinkedIn, right? Getting these blog posts and these different newsletters to be able to go and attend some of these conferences and hear some of the thought leaders in the space at some solutions and have conversations. And, being able to go, hey, there's always going to be a nice, bright, shiny object out there. What are the core things we're ultimately still trying to do? And showing the value and demonstrate, you actually learn more instead of trying to be in the catch-up game, right? In the keeping up with the Jones and every latest technology.
That makes sense. So you've either partnered or built a new solution.
Yes.
Your teams are excited about it. You've launched it with a small pilot group on the ops team, or maybe it's expanding to a larger team now. Have you encountered situations where your teams have been, the product technology teams have been, the product is working fine, but it's not seeing adoption from the operations side? Does that happen? If so, why, and how do you go about, changing that?
It happens every single time, every single place. It comes down to, like I was talking about earlier, the alignment on the problems we're all solving, right? Technology is there to enable and accelerate some outcome. And if the operations teams, and what I've seen is not just the leadership of the operations teams that may be aligned to go do this new initiative or build this new technology, it's actually the middle management team. It's the frontline teams. What is it in for them? If they're not bought into why this will benefit, they may get scared going, oh, they're going to take my job. When actually it's going to change their roles to do higher value things, use their intelligence to add empathy or be more specific versus rote stuff that they're bored of, right? So if you're not engaging the right levels to be part of the solution, they're going to become part of the problem, right? They're going to be resisting the change versus adopting it. You go, hey, I can work, I'm a supervisor, I can spend time actually coaching my team instead of, looking at dashboards, right? And if they can, you can change that paradigm where they're bought in and they see the value proposition in whatever the new change is, they will be the champions to lead those changes. And that's what I think is hard. Every company has those change champions and those people that are detractors. You get a few of the detractors become change champions, boom.
Very interesting. And we were talking about this offline, but linking to that topic of generative AI and technology in general is creating doubt in the minds of existing workforce, whether this will replace me or is this to make my job better, especially anything with AI in it, people get resistant to it. So how do you take the organization along? And there are cases where actually it does end up replacing some people, right? So did you see resistance from teams of adopting AI because of that? And if so, how did you take them along to sort of embrace that change?
And it wasn't just the teams, so yes is a short answer, but it wasn't just the teams that you think are the end user agents. It was actually teams that were in shared service enabling teams too, right? They may be thinking about, I'm a content writing team and suddenly, I don't need to write anymore, generative AI can do it. But if you actually engage them to be part of the solution, saying they can actually cover significantly more content and at a higher quality, and one person can do a lot more, they can be responsible for a bigger area, and that helps ultimately the customer get the answers to their problem, right? So yes, we see this, but it's once again understanding from their point of view, what's in it for them, how will this, they can now be part of the AI team actually driving the change versus that's the product and tech team and I'm an ops team.
Right.
The agent teams, right, they're actually seeing some value so they can work on harder things, right, not simpler rote things, right? So it's really connecting the dots. I always talk about we need to drive clarity and alignment for every different type of role. There's different actors. Bringing them along brings them, everybody along versus one person pushing an agenda. It's actually a benefit for everybody.
Did you guys try any AI certification program or some kind of like a training or enablement which people could put in their LinkedIn or something? Like, hey, I'm a new AI certified person. It sort of builds an esteem, I guess, resume value and stuff like that.
We didn't do that in my most recent company, but at LinkedIn we did. We had a product education team that would actually provide different certifications and quality of other things that they could then add on their LinkedIn. So that was a benefit. But it's something that as the technology keeps changing, right, operations teams may want to consider, because being generative AI, certified for OpenAI or Claude or what, like these are things that people would be proud to have and could lead to a different role. They could move into become a product specialist or, a technical specialist if they were doing frontline. So it could actually advance their career too.
Makes sense.
So there's different techniques around, what's in it for them. Right.
Right. Absolutely. Going back to that topic of build versus buy versus partner, let's say you have a shiny new tool which you want to bring in or a new initiative which you want to support. CX is expensive because a combination of technology and people. It runs into millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars at organizations with that scale. How does work building a business case around that? Any advice of that? I'm sure you have had many such discussions with finance leaders, COOs, CEOs on that topic. How any best practices from your experience there?
Yeah, so it depends on the audience as well, right? If it's a CFO, they're looking at bottom line reduction, so there's cost and efficiency. And so there's already a compelling case when you talk about automating, making people more efficient at what they do, right? And that doesn't even mean reducing headcount, right? That is just of the work they have, they can do more efficiently and do more of. But when you talk about things like digital transformation and these kind of big buzzwords, it's all about how are we materially changing that experience by reducing the friction or the multiple handoffs that multiple different teams would have to normally do to touch it. If you can have somebody look and feel like an expert, they can see the whole context of the interaction. They can solve the issue that first time. The experience will be improved, which will reduce the cost because they're not having to contact with multiple channels, right? So it's really talking about the whole journey. So we did a lot about customer journey and what was the end-to-end journey from the different actors. And for the different stakeholders, for a CFO or something operations that wants to be more efficient and improve, here are those core metrics that will improve. We're not just going to tell you in 3 years, like, go talk to us. 3 months, 6 months, as we're doing and rolling it out, here's the actual changes we're seeing. So they're engaged. When it comes to the technology CTO or, the CEO, what experience am I driving? How is this getting us closer to the 11-star experience? How is this leveraging the technology stack that we have across the enterprise and adopting it into these teams that may have historically not? Like, it's finding out what they are trying to solve for, what their perspective is, and connecting the dots in material ways. They're seeing the benefits, they're seeing the experience change. They're part of the engagement to be able to, I was kind of say our job is to be part of like inception. You're incepting the idea so it becomes theirs. And then they're like, I definitely will fund it because it's that they're getting the credit of driving the change as well.
Interesting. But would you have top-down targets on, hey, this is the budget for this space, or this is like if a business was hitting a tough patch, or because you wanted an 11-star experience, or at LinkedIn you wanted differentiated positioning, budget was not a problem?
Budget's always a problem. It's always going to be guidance. But there's different, the kind of joke we always say is, Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, when the pandemic happened at Airbnb, that was the time when companies were cutting spending. We actually said, can we take some of the reduction spend and invest in the platform now? So in 2 years or 3 years, whoever knew how long it was going to be, the platform would be there to scale with the changing business needs. But that's going to require investment. We're not asking for all. Here's a small, and we'll show you in 6 months the actual improvements so you can invest in the next fiscal planning. So it's using the opportunities of LinkedIn had a password hack in 2016 and suddenly volume just increased in operations teams. We said, hey, we can build automation because half of the stuff could be self-served instead of human handled. Let's build some capabilities even before there was GPT bots, right? So there's different opportunities to be able to go, we have ultimate goals to improve the experience at a lower cost. Sometimes you get caught into just the reducing cost piece. But if you bring it back to what are we solving for across those stakeholders, you can actually do something that drives really positive outcomes, but drives a better experience and gives you credibility to invest in the newer technology and capabilities that continue to come out there that interest your team to stay engaged.
That makes sense. That's really interesting. I really love that idea of during pandemic pulling some of the spend in, but using that to sort of build a
Best for the future.
longer term solution. It's makes so much sense. Given your background in management consulting, I'm just thinking, I'm sure you must have seen in subsequent organizations pitch from people, or maybe you have worked with outside partners to do digital transformation. Accenture did a lot of that.
Mhm.
When should business leaders think about that kind of partnering with outside consulting firms to lead digital transformation? I don't know how many Silicon Valley companies do it, but I'm
It's
curious.
changing, and it depends on the maturity of the company, right? If you're even a really high growth stage and you're starting to have the McKinseys and Accentures, it may not be the right time.
Yeah.
So when you're looking and you have some experienced leaders bringing in we want to invest for the future, let's not get too far where we have to clean up a mess later. You have some foresight. So I've personally been on the end. I've been brought in at times where I've helped the company think about what's happening in the next few years while delivering the near-term value.
Mhm.
And so these consulting companies, others, they can be strategic in helping you go, what is other people at my size or other in the same industry doing? So use it as an information gathering source. They can also help you implement it. But if you have a capable team, you may be able to just use them for the strategic kind of outlook, but use your own teams to actually do. And that's what I've been able to do the last few years.
So you never used an outside team to
We would use them to be spot augment, right?
spot augment. Okay.
But not to be running the whole thing. When I was a consultant years ago, I was part of large transformations where I was the one helping bring the thing in.
Yeah.
And I used to always say, and if I was just here 10 years before, you need a big bring company to go do a transformation. We can do the transformation. They say it's like the overnight success over multiple years, right? We can be doing it along the way while the company's growing instead of a big transformation at the end.
Absolutely. One topic, and again, going back to Airbnb a little bit, this 11-star experience or LinkedIn or eBay or any of these companies, at level, we think about this a lot. Customer experience in some ways is one of the enduring differentiations of a brand. When we think of a brand, any top brand, Apple or Tiffany's, or whatever we think of in our minds, customer experience comes to mind. How are you sort of actively thinking at the companies you worked at to have goals around that? Because CSAT is one thing, but how does, and customer service also often becomes about cost, but given how important it is in building brand and positioning, how do customer service teams play an active role in that? And what was some of your experiences there?
So one of the things that I've seen in my consulting life and then even joining some of these companies is a lot of them think at first, a lot of the leadership or operations team that have been historically customer service or ops, that they don't have a seat at the table, right? And I think if you keep saying that, you'll be a victim and be not invited to the table. So how do you get invited is you understand what the CEO's plan is, right? If Brian Chesky wants to have 11-star experience, how can CS, community support or operations actually be driving towards that? How many different interactions happen with support every year? Those could be brand ambassadors or people that really advocate. In every time when things go wrong, they can be the turnaround, right? And turn around the experience. So it takes some opportunity to be able to demonstrate, right? It's not just saying, hey, you should invite me to the table. It's actually when there's these crises, when there's these opportunities to drive the experience, saying, hey, here's what we can go do, and then showing, right? Telling, but then showing what you've done so you get top of mind. And so Airbnb was an example over, when I first joined to when I left, there became from almost once a quarter, maybe once a year kind of engagements to weekly engagements with the E team, right? Around what our plans, what we're doing, how is GenAI going to change the experience? How can we experiment internally? How does it then impact the overall product experience and the whole experience?
And was that feedback more around specific programs which you wanted to do, automation, or was it about improving a score by 10 percentage points, or like those weekly or periodic interactions?
There's a little bit of both, right? Okay. So we use at Airbnb and even LinkedIn NPS as the factor to measure the experience at a top level. And you could see that the host experience and the guest experience NPS was very different pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Why was that happening? And there's two sides of the marketplace. Why is somebody happier than the other? Is the policies geared towards one side or the other? And so if you can unpack the data and say, here's the things we're going to materially do to improve this side, he would want to understand, and the leadership would want to understand that where is it going and what are we doing to improve it? Some things are hard to move. You can do a bunch of different things. It may not be a technology play. It's actually a policy or process play, right? So people, process, and technology working together, we can materially say, here's the change that we're seeing in a statistically significant way, and make the change and continue the progress, which then gives you more credibility to try new things, right? And so that was a unique thing at LinkedIn. Jeff Weiner was the CEO at the time. He really got the member value proposition. So we would have member value meetings that our data served up. Here's what actually is happening, right? It wasn't just a downstream support ticket issue. It was like, this is what's happening for a consumer on LinkedIn versus an enterprise company using it. So using that rich data as something that filters out the signal and go, here's how we can improve the whole product experience.
That's so interesting.
Versus just being a downstream cost center.
That is so interesting. And I'm going back a little bit, but I think it'll be helpful for our listeners to understand this. So across the CX organizations where you led, if you can talk about the org structure a little bit, because every company is organized slightly differently. Like at Airbnb, correct me if I'm wrong, you had product and technology teams. Like what specifically those teams and versus LinkedIn versus eBay?
And Airbnb has gone through a couple changes when I joined, right? When I just left recently, we were moving to more of a functional model. But the way that it worked is I've been in companies where there's a chief product officer and product and technology and CTO work under those orgs and support the operational orgs, right?
Okay. Yep.
That's the model that I've worked in. But I've also worked in and we've shifted towards this at LinkedIn and Airbnb, where the product and platform teams move under the COO or under the head of global operations. So you're closer to those customers and you're not shipping stuff over the fence, you're working together. You do need to have leaders that are connecting the dots across, but our engineering team reported into the CTO, but for all intents and purposes, worked under the product roadmap and our experience together with the business. So we could work and deliver an end-to-end solution. So it wasn't just product features that had one thing, design was doing their own thing, and engineer and ops. It was one team working together. So we created functional separate silos to one integrated team working on initiatives together.
So in the setup which you're mentioning, where these product teams report to the COO and roll up, their engineering also for this for CX would roll up to the CEO, or was it be separate reporting to the CTO?
At Airbnb, it was under the CTO.
Okay.
But for all intents and purposes, worked under the same objectives, the same outcomes, and the same goals.
And this change happened recently, rolling up to the CEO, or?
In the last couple of years.
And what model do you, if you had to design an organization from scratch, what would you do? Which path would you go?
I personally would do a little hybrid of some of the best, because there's trade-offs to completely aligning into kind of central silo teams all supporting, because then they kind of get out of touch. I would have a little bit of, there's alignment on the outcomes to the business leader. And you're engaged, and that's what we did at Airbnb. We created platform teams that were organized to support the operational organization. But core product, guest and host, you don't want them to be disconnected. So you need to have some connective tissue. Airbnb moved to a product marketing model as well. So there was a new role that would kind of bridge across what is the product marketing experience, more similar to an Apple. But the Metas and Googles have more than historical. So I would do a hybrid of each, knowing where there's trade-offs on information flow, teams wanting to build the cool latest thing and not wanting to be engaged, or adoption. So having that full kind of balanced scorecard of what are the core metrics we're trying, and how do we do this? How is technology be enabler? And what are those core principles? I think it doesn't matter what the org structure is. You're all aligned to the same outcomes.
Yeah. And any stories which you, from your experience, and you mentioned the LinkedIn one, any firefights which were fun and memorable? Like Airbnb globally, LinkedIn globally, eBay, very different areas where, because as technology partners to CX organizations, we see Black Friday sales and holiday trickle-ups or insurance sign-up events. And there's a lot which I'm sure the leaders are going through on their side. So any firefights which you remember?
I have so many firefighting stories. Just at the eBay, it was like the seasonality of Black Friday and the Christmas holiday, and now the Amazons have the Amazon Day, Prime Days, and things like that. But kind of the seasonality of making sure that the systems can handle the load, right? The technology can handle the load for these big events. There was many different in the trench stories of systems just not working and everybody scrambling, staying up all night and working. At LinkedIn, I was talking about this password hack that was an unfortunate thing that went on the dark web. Suddenly, volume spiked significantly. we had to partner with a company that was using crowd experts to handle the volume because we didn't have enough. We were mostly in-house. So we had to have people trained up, and that's we started building some automation and some capabilities.
In almost a few days, I guess.
A few days, like in days, hours, right?
Hours.
Volumes would come up. Airbnb, the pandemic happened and it completely changed, right? So I've been through several crises, but like I said, using those crises to actually go, how can we actually get things done more effectively, right? And people are more engaged when they're not just working on their personal agenda, their personal like initiative on. And, you know, I give a lot of credit to Brian Chesky around aligning this to our core. What was the core? So we shut down core businesses that were, you know, supplementary to Airbnb to focus on our core business to get it right. And then as things matured and the pandemic lifted, starting to go back into the expansion over the last few years. But now we have a stronger foundation. We have a platform. We have aligned to the experience that we're trying to drive, right? It's not just you do your job, I do my job. We hope it works. I like to say, let's have an intentional strategy versus an accidental strategy, right? And there's been so many war stories where that came true, and we didn't always get it right, but we learned fast.
Absolutely. One question which I should definitely ask you, as I mentioned, voice AI agents in general, we are sitting in Silicon Valley. There's a new company coming up every day on this topic, and there's so much buzz around AI making people in the call center sort of obsolete and, you know, everything being automated. You've seen retail, you've seen technology, you've seen Airbnb. If you had a crystal ball 5 years from now, how much automation has happened? Are humans still talking to customers? What percent? And across different industries, right? Because I know it varies, but where would you put your money? What percentage automation, or how do you generally think about this topic?
I mean, I've been blown away because I've been in technology for a long time, but just the curve the last few years, right, with some of the disruption that's happening, and everybody's talking about AGI and all these other buzzwords. What I think is going to be, it's going to be very similar to how we think about electricity, right? We don't think about, oh, I'm working in an electricity-filled office, right? It's just an office. So AI, infrastructure, compute, like agentic actions, all these buzzwords will just be how you do your job. And it's just going to be a part of living. And it's going to be like the internet. No one ever thinks about doing their job without the internet today. It's just part of their computer that does work, right? And today it's very funny. It's like, oh, I need to have this AI initiative to do this AI thing versus it is just how you do work. The tools are built in, how we think about experiences, how people buy and sell and shop with our phone, like these things that the consumerization is happening in the enterprise. And it's going to happen faster where it just becomes, nothing isn't built without AI just naturally happening, right? Natural language. I'm using utility tools even to write my emails that 4 months ago, I was typing out. Now I'm just using my voice, and it's very high transcription, but high quality. It's saving me a ton of time for brainstorming, for thinking about strategy, and that's just in a few months. Right? So it's only going to get better. So I'd say if it's not 100% adoption, it is in the high 90s of just how we just live and work.
But that's adoption, right? But if I push you that which totally agree with that makes so much sense. But what percentage of, pick a company, pick any of your last companies of, let's say it had 100 folks in the CX team, what percentage of that would be replaced by an AI agent?
The replacement's always something that's, for me, a misnomer. Like I've always thought of it, it's going to change those roles. So if the business is growing, that's the key thing, that 100 should probably still be 150 or 200, whatever the growth, but they're doing different things. They're no longer doing the easy stuff because it's been automated, and it's done with great automation, not automation so they don't contact us, automation so they actually get back on their journey, right?
So you don't buy into the vision of, which I don't as well, by the way, my AI sort of helper calling a brand's AI agent, and they talking to each other and resolving an issue.
It's an interesting, the paradigm of collaboration will change. It's going to be human to human to AI to then human to AI to human, right? And everything in between and all those. So I think of it more as it's there to, one, augment and then accelerate, right? So you're going to have people do so much more. They can be Iron Man, they can be geniuses, right? Batman, we always said, was Bruce Wayne until he had his tools. He suddenly became Batman. He was able to do so much more with what he had. Right. So I'm a strong believer in that. It will change the type of work, right, that we're hiring. You don't need labelers doing little, things to train the model anymore. You can have synthetic data and AI build those things. But the role of thinking through the trust and safety issue or that, privacy thing, the strategy around that. So the roles will change so people can have a different level of thinking.
Yeah. So you are in the camp, it seems like, of AI assisted humans, not humans replaced by AI.
I'm a augment and accelerate.
Augmented.
Sunglasses with the video and the image, and
Absolutely.
the Iron Man mode versus the dystopian mode.
Absolutely.
It could go different ways if we don't make the right decisions, but I'm a strong believer that this is an accelerator and enabler.
Right. Iron Man versus Dystopia. I love that. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Andy, for your time today. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today's session. I'm sure this is very valuable for our listeners to hear from you on this inaugural AI and CX podcast. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Great to see you.
Thanks, Andy.